it's kind of a survey, kind of a census type project in a village from an NGO. Um, Before we joined, each census takes about 3 to 4 years to do,
Wow.
and then they were trying to use laptops, obviously using Excel, typing, right, typing on site, and they hit so much difficulty. And when we launched, we send people with tablets, and that cut from 3 years to about 6 weeks. The entire
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. This is Darren Pulsford, Chief Solution Architect, author, and most importantly, your host. On this episode, From Paper to Digital, the Future of Enterprise Data, with special guest Zi Wang, CEO of Xerion Software. Zi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, we had an interesting conversation yesterday, and you got an interesting background in digital transformation, helping organizations that are typically very paper-driven into digital transformation. I thought that was fascinating. But before we dive into that, every person that I have on my show is a superhero, and every superhero has a background story and an origin story. So, Z, what's your origin story? What's your background story?
Right, background story. I came to Earth.
Well, all right, now we need to know where you actually came from, right?
Right. So, well, I grew up in Hong Kong, and came to the U.S. for college, and I landed here in the East Coast of U.S. and never left for now. Gosh, over 30 years, never left.
That's a big change from Hong Kong to the eastern United
Huge. Is
States.
huge. I mean, one of the crazy story I always tell is I call home, and I told mom, it's like, mom, do you like, you have no idea what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a McDonald's, and it's its own entire building. Like, can you imagine that? So that is like a huge cultural shock for me. McDonald's has never been a standalone building to me growing up. It's been a little tiny shop in a shopping mall.
Well, in Hong Kong too. I mean, Hong Kong, when you say its own building, it's mostly skyscrapers in Hong Kong,
Right, right, exactly.
right? So yeah, that must have
So
just blown her mind.
yeah. So among other things, and so I was trained as a computer scientist, and a tech guy. So 1 year before graduating from college, I started my first company. And long story short, I worked about 10 years, and then I started a couple businesses. So that's my short story.
That's awesome. So, software engineer by background, you're a
Right,
serial entrepreneur. You've started
right.
several businesses. So, interesting. Where have you primarily focused your career? What areas have
Right.
you focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing my current company since 2009. So for
That's
the
pretty good.
last 15, 16 years has been in digital transformation. I mean, hence I'm here.
Yeah.
More specifically is mobile data collection. Is Yeah, it's on. I mean, 2009. If you remember that time, 2008 is when the App Store came about. So there was a little story about like what happened during that time, and App Store came about. And at the time, my partner and I, we were already working on a consulting company. We were building a consulting company, and then the App Store came up, and we're like, oh my god, this is it. I still remember one of my friend called me during summer of 2008. Is like, you know what, Z, we miss our 80s. This is our 80s all over again. Don't miss it. He said, I'm quitting. You should too. Like, at the time, we were working on a little consulting gig within like a big company. He's
Uh-huh.
like, I'm quitting. I'm doing this thing. You should quit too. So I kind of did, and then we found this little little company, and then it's been the last 15, 16 years. So
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, tell me a little bit about what you've seen out there in digital transformation, because you primarily target industries that are very paper driven,
right,
very hands on, right?
right.
Very, I got to touch it and feel it into these digital transformations. Give me a couple examples of those industries that you focused on.
Yeah. So in the early days, we focus a lot on the NGO business. Now talk about paper base. So the NGO industry, they survey people, they interview people, but a lot of time they interview people out in Africa somewhere, a village somewhere in Africa. So you can imagine they will carry paper. There's not much connection. There's not much tech involved. So trying to transform that business is particularly challenging, and that's what we're focused on since day one. It's offline data collection. I mean that's why they found us. That's why that industry found us. So in the NGO, you can imagine. I remember one of the project, um, just saving the paper. They need truckloads of. I mean, they need trucks. They need pickup trucks to transfer the paper from the site back to the location to then have someone type them in. Like
Oh my
just that
goodness.
saving is millions of dollars over multiple years, right?
No,
So like
yeah, not
yeah,
even. I'm thinking about the amount of time
yeah.
too.
I mean, usually I say this, and you can imagine, like, just that. Don't not even think about retyping, and we talk about labor costs. Just the physical paper themselves cost money to move. I mean, just like you
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
imagine. So that, I mean, to me encompasses digital transformation, because I mean one project when we launch, well, one of the project, it was done. It's kind of a survey, kind of a census type project in a village from an NGO. Um, Before we joined, each census takes about 3 to 4 years to do,
Wow.
and then they were trying to use laptops, obviously using Excel, typing, right, typing on site, and they hit so much difficulty. And when we launched, we send people with tablets, and that cut from 3 years to about 6 weeks. The entire process now can be done within 6 weeks.
So tell me a little bit about that, because you said at first when they first went out with laptops, it kind of failed. What was it that made it fail then? Because you would think, hey, a laptop's more powerful than a tablet,
Right.
um, and just putting a laptop in place. Why did that fail? What was so different?
Right, and this also encompasses a lot of, I mean, I'll call typical failure story, not just in NGO but throughout many projects in the quest of replacing paper, and that's end user usability. I mean, you and I would think, I mean, I can carry a laptop, type them in. How hard is that?
Yeah. How?
But
Yeah.
then
Exactly. Yeah.
when you're dealing with surveyor, some of them have never seen a laptop before. So that training, the laptop end up being too powerful. I mean, even the tablet, they were originally worried that it would be too powerful. But I mean, we basically lock it down to like the only one thing you do. You turn on, and that's the thing you do. You can't miss it. I mean, so like I am a tech guy by trade, so I don't know how to build beautiful screens. I build
Right.
screens
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
worked, and that end up being a great thing, because like they all say, well, it's so simple, you cannot mess it up. And I also like big buttons, right? So I build big things, big fonts, big buttons. I mean, in our world, people say like that's so ugly, but then in many worlds, I mean, that's why it's starting to work, because it works from the end user's perspective.
So that's really interesting. So you made it simple, and
Right,
it only did one thing, because
Right.
a laptop, there's so much power in a laptop. I can do all these different things. Too much configurability with with the tablet. You limited it to here's the survey. Just write in here or click a button saying
Click
yes
buttons,
or
mostly, or click buttons.
click buttons. 5 people in the family for a survey, right?
Correct.
That sort of thing.
Drop
And
down list, like most recording are basically just tons and tons of drop down lists.
so this is interesting because you mimicked kind of how the survey was done before.
Hmm.
It was
Yeah.
on a sheet of paper, right? It was a sheet of
Right.
paper that they had little things they could check mark or
Mhm.
write, maybe a couple areas where they'd write things. So you mimicked what they were already used to.
Yeah, yeah. And in the early days, I mean, we say transferring a paper form into digital is not a it's an art, because now, like, now you can do a lot of things differently than before, like auto calculation, like skip logic, right? You didn't have that on a piece of paper, so you lay everything out. So a lot of our customer would assume we just like basically scan the thing, and then you have a tablet, the tablet looks like paper. No, but let's don't do that. Let's only present a couple questions at a time to the surveyor, right? So you ask one or two questions, and then once you finish asking, it will go to the next question. So that thought process is slightly different than your paper form, but eventually make it more powerful and easier to use to the end user.
So you did change their process as well,
Right.
a little bit, not huge.
Yeah.
I mean, right? The general process was identical, but when you got down to, hey, I'm a digital form now, I can do more target. I can be more prescriptive, right? If
Right.
I answer yes to this question, then I'm going to ask these other questions instead of
Correct.
say, now go to
Section
number
16.
questions.
Right.
See, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So that's really fascinating. That and how was that? How did that feel to the surveyors? Was there training that had to happen,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
was it pretty straightforward for them? How'd that
Well,
go?
there's still training, but so the
Okay,
funny thing is, like, because I mean, in that realm anyway, in the NGO realm, a lot of surveyors are young people, so they recruit teenagers, early 20s to do the survey,
and it's
and that
seasonal work. You're not a trained
right,
surveyor, right? I
right,
mean,
right, and it actually has a side effect because now we're taking teenagers away from any trouble, giving them something meaningful to do. So I mean, actually we did a couple seasons of actually teaching some of them how to build forms, right? So they like
oh,
for the
interesting.
best ones, right? Not only can they now take this thing and go do surveying, make some money in the process, some of them can actually make a living out of it. So yeah, I was extremely proud of that of that type of projects.
So that's a really interesting because you rarely find a business opportunity that is so seasonal and so
Hmm.
short term focused, right?
Right.
Where I'm training the end users for a one time thing.
Hmm.
But then you found some individual ways of extending that beyond, which I think is pretty brilliant. Are there any other industries that you guys have focused on that you've taken the same sort of concept on? Hey, we can take paper forms, we
Hmm.
can transform that physical. I like to call it physical data
Right.
acquisition.
Right.
In Are there any other industries that this applies?
Yeah, yeah. Yes. Right now we play a lot in agriculture and environmental science, where they need to go survey, right? So like again, we play well in the disconnected environment where you are out in the wilderness, you have no connection, right? And agriculture and environmental science has a lot of those. We also like basically we count stuff, right? So I I joke about we inspect stuff and we count stuff. So we
Inspect
count
and
we count
count. Okay, there
fish,
you go.
we count people, we count pigs, we count pets. Yeah, there's a lot of those types of things, those projects. But agriculture in particular, right now we play quite a bit in that world.
So you take the same concepts. How unique is each engagement? Is each engagement completely different from the other, or have you found some common ground between them all? What are some of the things that you found between them all?
It depends on who you ask. If you ask me, they're all data, right? So data is data.
Okay,
That
yeah,
makes no difference, right? But of course, they're very different. And in particular, it all goes back to the end user. Some engagement, like what I talk about NGO, that engagement, the actual end user are not the experts. But then some engagement, particularly in agriculture, the end user are the experts. So we have customers who are doing genome research in plants. So they go out and they look at the plants, how they grow on a weekly basis, and the end user who's going out looking at the plants are the
the
PhDs,
experts. Yeah, yeah.
right? So that is very different when you're
Oh,
dealing with
yeah.
two very separate worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine the expert, if you're a subject matter expert, you're expecting certain verbiage to be used
Mm-hmm.
and certain ways of looking at data that is unique to you, right? I mean, to your field.
Yeah,
So, how do you
it's
get in the
actually
head?
opposite. It's
Oh,
actually
really?
opposite. Yeah.
Really?
When you're dealing with the end user who is not the expert, you want to build forms that is very, very restrictive. There,
Yes, of
it's
course.
just
Yes,
it's just
yes.
like pick list, option list. You don't make mistakes. But then on the expert side, there are two very different things. One is the form tend to be more open. You allow them to type, to take pictures, to record what they were thinking, and then also have their ability to change the form almost every time they come back. So they will go to observation and come back and say, oh my god, I need to capture one more thing or one last thing, right? Versus in the world where the end user is not the expert, you rarely do that. Like
You restrict them. That makes sense. That
right,
totally makes sense.
right.
So after let's walk through the scenario of
Sure,
uh, uh, corn breeders.
sure.
There's a good one.
Yep,
Corn breeders. They're going out
yep.
there with their tablet. They're taking notes. They're taking a picture, maybe audio recording because you said
Mm-hmm,
that's available.
mm-hmm,
I do all that stuff. It's on my tablet. I'm not connected. I bring that back. Now what happens?
mm-hmm. So that goes into what we call data flow. Um, Now it doesn't matter how much you collect if you can't make use of it. It's just data sitting there,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
and that's a lot of what story we heard about um, drone footage, which we're working with drone companies too. But anyway, so to the back we have another like process, what we call data flow, and it's basically mix and match, um, send to like your downstream, like your Power BI, right? In Microsoft World, we can send to Power BI. You can summarize, right? Do simple things, but it's just basically we allow customer to do simple massaging of data, and then they can decide where data would go.
Okay, so you're taking the structured data because the data you're getting from surveys is semi-structured, I guess would be the
Mm-hmm.
right word,
It is,
right?
yeah.
Because you've got fields, some of them are restrictive, some of them are open. So you have semi-structured data. You're providing that to their own analytics tools. So
Mm-hmm.
from that point, you can step back and say that's someone else's
Right,
problem,
right,
which
right,
makes
right.
sense, right?
I
Because
right.
yeah,
I've a saying like we give you good data. After that is your problem.
it's your problem. Got it. Have you seen in that space in the data because the data collection is so important and getting it in a well-known semi-structured
Mm-hmm.
format, which is what
Good
you're
form, yeah.
providing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any use of the new AI tools that we're seeing in that space? up to the point of analytics. Are you guys taking advantage of any AI in that space?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're using AI in a few different ways, right? Obviously, in the actual data analytics, we can do a little bit more on how to do with data right now, like even
Okay.
just within our realm, right? We're also building an AI form builder. So now, I mean, building form used to be you click, correct, right?
Right, right,
Right
right,
now,
right.
of course, you can still do that, but you can now talk to it. It's like I don't like that, like remove that and we'll remove it. I mean, it's actually
That's
quite fascinating.
nice. So
Um,
so you could actually move to the customers and say, tell us about your form,
right,
and your AI could generate the form for them.
right. Especially now we're moving more like I will say this. I mean, within this last 6 months or so, right? This vibe coding era. Um, so I don't know. Like I assume your audience is sophisticated enough that understand what vibe coding is.
No, 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 no.
Um,
Explain it because I don't think everyone
okay,
is.
Okay, so like this is a skill that I think it didn't exist 1 year ago, but now it everybody needs to have it. Vibe coding is coding without typing the code, right? So like imagine like so I grew up working with developers, right? So the first time when I became a manager, I'm dealing with 6 7 developers. At that time, I'm too busy. I can't type my own code, right? But I need to know what they're typing, and that is the skill that I developed like this a long time ago. I call whiteboard coding, right? I'll work with the developer and say, so like, how do you solve this problem? I'll whiteboard a little bit, and then they say, oh, I get it. They go back and
Right, right.
type,
Yeah.
right, and they send me back like they I will look at their GitHub repo, right, to see what was done. Now, vibe coding is that skill doing with an AI. So you, like a boss, you will say, well, let's put this together, or you will say, like this algorithm is not quite right. Let's change that. This array shouldn't be an array, right? It should be a
It
list
should
or
be a
something,
map
right?
or a
But
list or yeah, collection. Yeah.
you will instruct the AI to actually create the program. You never type a single line of code, and that skill is called vibe coding. It's going with the vibe, right?
No,
Right,
no, you're right. I've seen this. So you're taking that concept for software engineering into vibe forms, basically, right?
right, right. Oh, actually, beyond that. So right
Oh,
now,
okay.
now, um, it's my prediction that within certain time, and I can't name it, could be 2 years, 5 years, um, what we're doing, as well as all of the no code platform, will become irrelevant when vibe coding becomes more meaningful than today. Now, today is already very good. We already
Yes.
have product manager. I mean, product manager can now do what a developer used to do using vibe coding because a product manager knows what they want to build. They just, in the past, they weren't able to build. Now they are working with an AI to actually make that happen. So basically, with that ability to build raw code, you no longer need any no code platform. Like what no code, including iPhone Builder,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah,
my
yeah. No,
product,
I know what you
right,
mean. Yep.
is simply an easier programming platform, right? So like
Yeah, it's
building a
just another
form or
level of
building an app,
abstraction.
right?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Building a mobile app used to be quite difficult. So you say, well, I want these types of tool to help me build simpler app. If the fact of building an app becomes as simple or even actually simpler, then there's no room, no reason to have no code platform. So
So,
yeah,
so I understand what you're saying here, and it's making me think that also the languages that we use today, the programming languages, were all written so that humans could interact with the machine more effectively. So
correct,
why even go there? Why
correct,
not just have a Gen AI generate machine code direct?
correct, correct. Yeah, That
right?
is so going to happen. I mean, but
Yeah, it's so
so
much
now we're
faster. So,
right.
but we're going to run into some new. We still need software engineers and computer
Oh,
scientists,
absolutely, absolutely. So like
but
I
we
get these
don't need
questions.
typists
Well,
anymore, right?
yeah, I mean, it's very similar to I equate this to like when you learn. I mean, I mean, I would imagine if you learn photography, if you learn photography, you still need to understand like the lens, the aperture, all of those things.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
in the real world, I mean, I this is good enough. What the skill set that you need in the real world is how do you pose a nice picture, right? So I call that your taste. You need to have good taste of what a good program should look like. You need to learn extremely fast because I mean throughout the your vibe coding journey, the AI may suggest a new library that you never heard of. Now you need to judge. You need to understand if
is
this
that a
is
good
the right
library or
library.
not? Yeah.
So then your foundational training is still very important. So I still tell people like you absolutely need to know computer science. Don't just think in a few years it will be a box and anybody type in that box will create beautiful program. I can create beautiful program because I have that taste. Just like someone with the same camera can take amazing picture and you can't. I mean that's the same thing.
No, I hear you, and I've been teaching at Vanderbilt University a master's level course, and this semester was the first semester that I had them use vibe coding to do the
That's
assignments,
great.
and they were freaking out. They were like, "This is cheating," and I said,
it,
"Let me tell you something. If you don't do it this way, the project's
you
going
be
to take
replaced.
forever, and you're never going to get done." Um, and I thought I did a pretty good job at helping them. And then
No,
just
that's
recent,
great. That's
yeah,
great.
but just recently, IntelliJ. I don't know if you're familiar with IntelliJ.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
IntelliJ by JetBrains came out with Junie.
Mm,
And
that I didn't know.
Junie is it takes vibe programming to the next level. You can give it one phrase like, "Hey, I need to build in Java Spring Boot a movie recommender system."
Right,
That's it, and
right,
hit go ahead and do it. It will then walk through all of the steps that need to happen and start doing them. And when it needs a prompt from you, it asks you, "What about this?"
right.
And you type in, "Oh, yeah, go do it." And then it keeps going. So I'm like,
Like
"Oh
a
my
great
goodness, that
consultant.
yes, that's my whole class was just completely done." And I'm like, "Yeah, I got to up my game for next time I teach that class." So I truly believe what you're saying. It's changing. We still need subject matter experts, just
Mhm.
like the corn breeder,
Right,
right? He
right,
knows, or she, right?
mhm,
They know about corn breeding. They
right.
know how intuitively they know what to ask next, and this is something that AI is going to still require us humans to be the subject matter experts on. So
Right. I again, I still think we need computer scientists. It's like even I mean I would
but
say
maybe
vibe
not
coding.
programmers.
Well, yeah, no. So like programming itself evolved. It's like
Yes.
everybody needs to be the boss. I mean, like what I equate myself to, like when you graduate, you type every single line of code. But when you
Right.
became a manager, you no longer type. Now everybody graduate as the boss because you already have like AI coding for you. So how do you gain that knowledge? I mean, it's that I still think you need foundational knowledge. You need to understand how things work in order to guide the AI to do the right thing.
I totally agree. And this is where I see that we could have a problem, though, because a lot of things that you learn as a subject matter expert, you learn through experience,
Right.
not just reading. You also have to experience it too. So if I'm leaving school and now I have to be the boss and I'm the subject matter expert, I have no experience.
Right.
So we somehow have to get them to experience some things earlier on. So this is going to be a big dilemma that we're going to have to work through. That I,
Yeah. Especially, I mean, I think. the entire education system needs to change, not just computer science school.
Everything.
Every school. Everything.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Hey Z, this has been really fascinating. You're right there at the bleeding edge. It's an interesting edge because you're dealing with organizations that are, I would say, technically, typically very far behind,
Mhm.
but you're at the bleeding edge of technology and human interaction, which I think is really fascinating. And I think you're in a perfect spot for the future because the future is real human interaction and how
Right.
we as humans interact with data and machines is changing completely. And I think you're right there at the perfect spot.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we're solving boring business problems, and I don't see that ever going away.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I love that. Hey Z, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
No problem. That's awesome. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and embrace the digital revolution.